Ndoda kutinyika isiwe vanhu vangu inguva yedu hatinga tatsi kubudirira mwari ari parutivi pedu rambai muchirwa. My hitters gon' die, don't die, the real hitters gon' shine and my people gon' rise, cause we're born to win, I ain't saying but I'm saying.
Loyalty's my favorite characteristic of God, but finding it in it is hard. It's like trying to find God. You're the only one in your camp with cheese. You pay for everything they eat. Man, that insecurity is deep. Now I ain't said no names. These are just theories. If you hear me, baby, it's home. You must admit it's kinda eerie, baby. Like them chemtrails in the sky. Hate the selling the slaves, kinda like the combines. We say everything in moderation, but don't do it in moderation. The lies of a gluttonous generation. 10-year-old girl in.
Grand Rising, everybody. Welcome to the Day with Trae, first episode of season 2. I'm so excited to be with you all in 2023, and we got a wonderful Wednesday up for you all. One of my guests had something going on, and so she will be rescheduling, but I'm excited because, of course, it is a wonderful Wednesday anytime I have Brian Callanan in the building, and although there won't be an episode tonight, we're going to be diving into some hot topics that I'm sure will be covered next week and moving forward. You guys know how Brian and I get down, so I'm excited that he's here to dive in deep with me today. And I just want to thank you all for all the love on season 1. You guys definitely gave your love, and I am so glad that y'all are rocking with us for season 2. Of course, it's the top of the show, so it's a great time for you to tag and share the stream. Go ahead, tag and share the stream so that you could help folks who you think could benefit from a daily dose of dopeness right here on the Day with Trae. Make sure that you are tagging it and sharing it on any social media platform. And if you can't watch us, you can always listen to us anywhere you find your favorite podcast. Just search Converge Media Network and the Day with Trae. Y'all will find me on Google, Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, you name it. We're on all of the platforms. Thank you to everybody who's sharing the podcast and sharing the stream. But today is also a very special day. It is January 4th, 2023, and we got to say happy birthday to somebody very special to us here at Converge. There it is. Happy birthday, Reverend Harriet Walden. That's right. I call her the mother of Converge because she is literally the mother of Omari Salisbury, but she is so beautiful. Her soul resonates with so many in the community. And I personally have been able to benefit from her wise words of wisdom, from her love and her care, her attention to detail in ensuring that future generations understand the history so that we can be informed. She will pull me to the side and update me on things I had no clue about. And so I just want to send a special shout out to you, Reverend Walden. We love you. We appreciate you so much. All of the love that you show to all of our shows here at Converge, not just the Day with Trae, but you've been rocking with me since day one, my very first day on Converge Media. And I just thank you for all that you have given, all you continue to give, and all the love that you spread and that you share. This is somebody who, if y'all don't know, I'm going to just tell you right now, when I tell you to be inspired to see yourself as a part of the solution, she is a true example of that. She has done it in so many different realms, and she continues to do it as an amazing elder in our community by staying connected to issues that matter to us on the ground. Her organization, Mothers for Police Accountability, has been alive and thriving for decades, and it's because she's understood the I think there's something special about a mother or a parent who goes through having to deal with their child being, contacted, accosted, murdered, killed, whatever, by police brutality. And so she's always been laying a solid foundation for police to be accountable, held accountable for their actions. And beyond that, she provides her words of wisdom to those who really need it. So I want to say thank you so much, Reverend Walden, for all that you have done. Thank you for being a prominent elder, a beloved elder, a distinguished elder in our community. And thank you for being our mother here at Converge. Converge. We love you so very much. Well, y'all, of course, I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to go to a break real quick before I bring my guy, Brian Callanan, in. After this short break, of course, I want y'all to stay tuned because you know me and Brian got lots to discuss. You're watching The Day with Trae.
Prosperity in Black America. What will this require? Is Black business prospering? Are we reaching women and minority-owned businesses? How do we achieve earning parity for wealth for our families? Do our children really have access to education? Will our families have choices for our children? Prison pipelines, mass incarceration, tearing our families apart. A healthcare system not accessible to the masses. The disproportionate termination of Black women from corporate America. When will we actually begin to address what's really at play? How do Black people gain more power to help make these changes? This requires a lot of political will and courage. I'm that provocateur of change. I am Cindy Bright. Welcome to Heartbeat.
COVID-19 hurt my income, my health, and my family. We were about to lose our home when we heard we might be eligible for homeowner assistance funds from the government. We called 1-877-894-HOME, and a housing counselor stepped in, talked to our lender, and saved our home. Federal funding details at washingtonhaf.org. That's washingtonhaf.org.
Will you marry me, baby?
Yeah.
Let me put this on you.
What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Trae Holiday. We're bringing back Black Love When We Met. That's right. We need something to warm all of our hearts and to elevate love once again in our communities. We want y'all to go to whereweconverge.com/Black Love so y'all can nominate your favorite couple for the next rendition of this show with me as the host. Let me sit down and have them on my couch and share how their love can inspire us all. Make sure y'all go and get your nominations in today and be on the lookout for Black Love When We Met coming at you on Converge Media very soon. Welcome back, everybody, to The Day with Trae. Of course, I'm your host, Trae Holiday, but joining me right now is a recurring guest of mine, a real friend, Brian Callanan. What's up, Brian?
Oh, it's good to see you. Happy New Year, Trae.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much for coming down. Now,
Yeah.
I didn't know you weren't having a show tonight, so I'm just glad that you still had time in your schedule
Absolutely.
to sit and chat with me. There's been so much going on,
Yeah.
Brian. I'm going to give you the floor so you can lay out some topics and we can get into discussion.
Cool. I know that we're not starting the podcast until next week, but I did want to let people know there's still a ton that's going on in City Hall right now. Just this week, we saw the appointment, the official, I guess, commendation and approval of the appointment of Chief Diaz as the permanent chief of the Seattle Police Department. The Seattle City Council just put that into effect yesterday, so that's some big news. Also, we're looking at what's happening at the city level. There's a discussion that's happening this afternoon in the city's homelessness committee where they're talking about how to manage some of the activity that's going to be happening on the waterfront, the Seattle waterfront. If you haven't seen it yet, folks, there's a really nice pathway leading down from Pike Place and whatever else leading to the waterfront right now. There's been a plan in the works for a while as to how to manage that. And when I say manage, I'm talking about security. I'm talking about dealing with people who are homeless and things of that nature. It looks like it's going to be some sort of public-private partnership, but the exact parameters of that are a big concern. But I do know, Trae, this is a really big concern for Seattle. This project has been in the works for so long. They're trying to make sure they manage it in such a way that people feel welcome. There are certain parts of the city where that might not be the case. And I think the city's really trying to do a good job with managing this place right here so it can be welcoming for tourists, welcoming for people who might be homeless and make sure they get the services they need, and also welcoming for people who live in the area. So that's something really big. Those two pieces are something really big the city is working on, at least this week.
Well, of course, I want to start with this bridge. I mean, you know, we are real close partners with Friends of Waterfront, and it's beautiful grateful to know that, like, when I saw the design for it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's very nice.
Yeah.
Like, that's taking it to another level. And being a Seattleite, I grew up with the fact that I was always like, why aren't these spaces
Yeah.
connected? Right. And you kind of had to go through some hoops to get
Oh, yeah.
from one of the spaces to another. So I love that the bridge is open. It is out. Kudos to everybody who was working on that project.
Mhm.
When we think about homelessness, it always makes me think about wraparound services.
Sure.
You can only do sweeps for so long.
Right.
They're not effective. So then that's money that the city is pouring in to an approach that actually doesn't yield the results they're looking for.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I was having a discussion about how there are some great kind of best practices that are happening in other counties throughout the state, right? If you look at kind of Washington state as a whole, one of the things that I think is a big opportunity for the state is to be creating systems that speak to each other with regard to resource allocation.
Yeah.
And I think you and I may have touched on this before, but the fact that, this county and this county and this county, this city aren't speaking to each other creates silos, Brian, which then if I am homeless in King County and I kind of exhaust resources in King County, then I try to go to Thurston County,
Sure.
right? I have to do that process all over again. And so for the person that is dealing with it, dealing with being unhoused, a lot of the burden lays on them because these systems don't speak to each other. So they don't understand, oh, you've been dealing with this for the last 7 years, because we see when you first entered into this system. With digitization that we have at our fingertips nowadays, you would think it would be easy to say, at a statewide level, we've created the system that all of you agencies get to use, that speak to one another, that can maybe change some of the parameters of how resource allocation is done. I mean, they're doing it with DSHS. If I try to go to another city and I've already exhausted DSHS in another city, they're like, oh, no, you already got your 5 years, right? Of TANF, right? Temporary assistance for needy families.
That's right.
So I'm like, it's not as if, it doesn't exist. So anyway, I love that you bring that up, because I was just having that conversation yesterday, and I realized that there's so much that needs to be done really at the state level to really empower cities to be able to make the choices they need to create sustainable solutions around homelessness.
It's a big deal, and I'm glad that you brought up what the state is doing or maybe not doing, because that's a big emphasis of something I'm focusing on with the Seattle channel this week. I'm actually talking to two of our Seattle area lawmakers here. I'm talking about Senator Joe Nguyen from the 34th district down in the West Seattle area. Goes out to Vashon there and in White Center too. I'm also talking with Representative Nicole Macri, who represents the 43rd district, going from downtown up towards Capitol Hill and into Northeast Seattle. And I think they're looking at a lot of these issues that you're talking about here, because I'm going to be talking with them in the studio on Seattle channel this week. Make sure you check it out here. You'll find me putting this on Twitter, etc. So check for that on Friday at the very latest. But in terms of what they're doing here, they're looking at a new plan that has come in from Governor Inslee. And this is really interesting because there's a big emphasis on housing in this new budget that the governor proposed a few weeks ago. A $70 billion budget, $70.4 billion, the biggest the state has ever had. But the investment that he is talking about is a very interesting one, because he's talking about setting up a $4 billion plan, actually a bond measure that would go before voters to say, okay, yes, we will invest some more money to make sure we have more housing. Because as it stands right now, some of the figures I'm seeing, I know I'm looking at this from a housing perspective with regard to homelessness, but that's a part of the picture here. When it comes to housing around the states, Seattle and the larger Washington state area, from what I've seen, ranks 50th among the 50 states in terms of available housing for the amount of people we have here. We have grown considerably over the past couple decades, Trae. As you know, we've seen it in the downtown area. We saw it with the redistricting process right here in Seattle, right? There's a lot of people that have moved into downtown and other areas of the city too. What the governor is saying now is, we don't have the housing for the amount of people that have come in. So he's talking about making this investment. And it's going to be very interesting to see how Seattle area legislators specifically deal with this, because putting this bond measure before voters, $4 billion, it's a pretty big lift. That's a big number to throw in front of people. And when I think about that in terms of Seattle specifically, think about it. Coming up in February, we've got this vote in Seattle for this I-135 for social housing out there. It's a very complicated issue, but I know it's one that a lot of people are connected with, trying to set up a public development authority to provide more housing in the area. So that's number one. Coming up later in the fall, the Seattle housing levy is up for renewal too. So think about that. Think about the social housing measure, and then think about possibly the state measure in the mix too. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion here. And I say that because I don't think it's quite settled yet. Yes, we need more housing, certainly, but the pathway through which we get there is still a bit confusing, I have to say. The city's doing a lot here in Seattle, and it has to. The state has to do it too. And I know we talk a lot about both and conversations. Let's make sure we make all these investments, but we're not dealing with inexhaustible resources either. So I think there's a bigger discussion about housing that's happening at the state level that I really hope we stay in touch with on this, because this is going to be changing over the next couple months as the state goes through its session.
Well, this is really intriguing for me, Brian, because I'll say that, one of the things that I think when you're just like a citizen and you're like, well, okay, all this money comes in, but what comes out?
Yeah.
And I think we saw in, the last previous sessions, there was a heavy investment in, housing, particularly around like those who are unhoused. How do we get a multitude of expansive housing so that, the fact that our cities have become unaffordable, and particularly Seattle is a major example of that. How do we make investments that are going to be there for the long term? This is where for me, it seems like it's simple as all get out. You ask the people what they need and you provide that need, right? If it's that you need, a multitude of different kinds of housing, this social housing, impact, that could be something that works, right? But also there are a multitude of things that you can be doing that, especially now with all the data and research that's out there, you can utilize, okay, what does some of these co-ownership housing models look like, for folks that are like, maybe they are lower middle income, so they're not able to own, but maybe together collectively, they could own their apartment complex. There's all of these different kinds of housing models that I actually researched when I was doing this work in the community, and realized that there's a lot that we're not actually doing here. And so we got to open up and expand our mindset when we think about the funds that are coming in. One thing I want to say about this too, Brian, is as much as we need the workers to do the work, we also need these investments to hit the ground. I think one of the major things that we've seen, unfortunately, is that infrastructure is needed. So you need like a KCRHA. Great, you do.
The Regional Homelessness Authority.
King County Regional Homelessness Authority. You need an entity like that to say, all right, we're going to tackle this issue at the county level. And then maybe what they do is a great model that can be replicated throughout other counties in the state that are dealing with similar issues. As we know, every city isn't dealing with this issue as much as other cities. We know that as well. So how have those practices for those cities, how can those be deployed elsewhere? There's a lot of things that need to happen, but one thing that I definitely want to speak against is the fact that you have a lot of people making six figures or more to deal with this issue, and yet the issue is constantly growing and persisting.
And it's the market is a piece of this too, Trae, because I think the important piece of what we're seeing, the social housing measure brings it up. We see it with the Seattle housing levy, and we see it with the state's issue or efforts with this too. We're not talking about we just need housing for people who are making 30% of the area median income or below. We're talking about housing needed at all levels there. And a lot of times you'll hear this from a few people who look at the housing market. You'll see this down renting kind of trend. Hey, you know what? I could afford, let's say, I'm going to throw out an example, like $2,000 a month. I know it costs more than that in Seattle for a lot of people, but let's say I could afford $2,000 a month. But you know what? I'm going to look around and find this place for $1,500 and grab that up. But that person who was topping out at $1,500 is like, oops, okay, I guess I better go to $1,000 over here, right? They'll move out of town per chance and maybe move down to an area where it's more affordable. You'll see this getting pushed down. And at a certain point, there's not much further to push, right? For those people of those lower incomes. And so those people do end up becoming homeless. And so that's, I think, the concern that's going on here is there's a vast pipeline we're talking about here. I wish it were simple. And I definitely hear your frustration with the amount of people who are working on this and what they're getting paid. I hear that loud and clear. But I think what the governor is trying to do, at least, is try to set some sort of statewide framework here so that the areas that need the help can get it. It's going to be a big situation where I know Seattle area lawmakers are going to say, hey, we need to argue for this much over here, but there's certainly needs that are happening in Eastern Washington. There's certainly stuff that's happening in Central Washington too, with extreme poverty in some of those areas. So I think it's going to have to be a very judicious choice there. And it's going to be a huge issue that our state is going to be struggling with. And Seattle is going to have a big impact on that vote too.
Yeah, this is exactly where, when we think about Seattle as a leading example, it's real. I mean, it is true. There's so much diversity throughout the city. And when we think about it from a state perspective, Seattle is the beacon, right? It just is. And so there's
some people outside of Seattle wouldn't say that, but
keep
going.
I've heard it, right? But
Right.
I mean, say what you will. If
Yeah.
somebody thinks Washington State, they think Seattle.
That's right.
I mean, that's just it, and it's not because I was born and raised here.
No.
I don't live in Seattle
This is
anymore,
where all the
but
business is happening, right?
This is kind of it is a major hub.
Yeah.
So in that regard, what is done at the city level,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm always saying that Seattle has the opportunity to lead.
Yeah.
What's done here can be replicated in other areas.
Okay.
And granted, there are some characteristics that would need to change because you have to customize these
Of course.
solutions for the area. However, if you can create a solid framework to follow,
Yeah.
right, then you can say, okay, maybe we don't need that, but we do need
Yeah.
these elements, or maybe we need to
Right.
add this other element, but
Right.
it gives you a foundation.
Right.
And that's something that I wonder, is that happening, right? Because unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like these cities are really talking to each other to some degree, Brian.
I hear you. And I think there's some competition between the different cities over exactly what you're talking about here. What do we need? Because the Seattle solution isn't the one that we all need. We definitely have heard that during the whole concern over homelessness and the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. Hey, what you're doing in Seattle, that's great and all, but that's not going to work out here in Auburn. We're not going to stand for that, right? So there's some different ways to approach it. I think with the housing issue in particular, what you'll see different cities, and I'm talking about municipal governments fighting for, is this whole issue over density. Where do we actually put people?
Yeah.
And that's going to be a big part of this discussion too, because I think what the legislature is trying to do, they tried this last year, they didn't get it pushed through, but they're trying to figure out this missing middle housing, as it's sometimes called. How do we figure out this area for people who are low to mid income, somewhere in there, that might need a duplex or a fourplex or maybe even a sixplex to actually afford a place to live in some of these different cities? This is a big discussion in the city of Seattle specifically when we talk about the comprehensive plan that's going on here. Where do we put density? Where's it going to happen? But I think what we're trying to, or at least what legislators are trying to do at the state level here, is trying to establish a floor. Basically, they're saying, okay, here's what we need. Here's the baseline that needs to happen in all the communities out there. Now, I know a lot of people don't want that to be a ceiling. They want it to be a floor. This is just where we're getting started. But just establishing that floor and where that's going to be has been difficult because we have a lot of different cities and counties that are different all around the state. So they're trying to say, all right, well, are you trying to push a Seattle solution on me? I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I think they are going to have to come up with some kind of basic floor here where you have these different requirements for different cities out there that wouldn't necessarily tie them to, build a duplex on every corner, but at least have the ability to do these different things so that we can build in this density, because that's a huge issue. And you have to look at it this way, Trae. It's not just in Seattle. It's happening in Spokane. It's happening in Walla Walla. It's all over the place. Go out to Lake Chelan. I was out there recently. Wow, they're building a lot of stuff out there. So this is a situation where it can have different impacts in different communities. It can gentrify certain areas and people can get pushed out. But I think this whole discussion about housing, I know we've spent some time on it, but it's worth it. It's something that impacts everybody, not just Seattle. And looking at it from a statewide level, man, there's a lot going on with this year.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with I think the investments are obviously really necessary, and kudos to those who are really trying to figure out this solution. I do think too that something that oftentimes doesn't get talked about enough is elevating solutions that are working on the ground.
Yeah.
You do have community-based organizations who have really stepped into the development space, who have stepped into understanding the needs of their communities. And they really are experts, right? Because they're directly connected to folks who need this different kinds of housing, right? Whether it is affordable home ownership models, affordable rental models, moving away from, the only way that we can fund affordable housing funding is through tax credits,
Yeah.
right? Finding ways to allow some of the smaller community-based organizations that are really plugged in
Yeah.
to their communities to become developers without all of the barriers that they face, right? Working with big time developers, having more of those folks who are available to partner with these organizations to get them going, get them started, get a couple projects under their belt so that they can really understand the process and become even greater experts, because now they not only understand their community needs, but they understand the entire process of development. And I think that I've seen that model. It works, right? At the end of the day, you create spaces where people feel welcome. And, you know, one of the things that I know is happening, you know, in terms of the state, is making people feel welcome. And ultimately, to hear the number that you said in terms of Seattle being 50th, I mean, that's really like, it's,
they're saying that at the state level, actually.
at the state level, us being like, that's a lot. That's something that really I can understand.
You don't want to be number 50.
Come on. And I can understand there needing to be a heavy investment because of that. So there's some adjustments here, and I'm glad that we have been able to dive into it, because when I'm listening to you and your clips, I'm like, oh, there's so much to say there. But I also want to talk about this too. You know, kudos to Chief Diaz, the official Seattle police chief now. You know, I heard a lot of good things about his time as a temporary police chief. Coming from his experience, and the fact that that has happened is amazing. I think I always say, if you could do it during an interim period, you know, and really showcase some growth metrics, then why can't you do it, you know, permanently?
Right.
I think when we think about policing, it still is a question of relationability.
Okay.
How relational can their approach become so that we can begin to dismantle the notion of it is us versus them? And I understand so many people are like, oh, Trae, but the way that it was built, it's always going to be that way. I understand the wide variety. And then people are like, but we need the police. When something happens, I need to call them. It is all of those things, right? All of those things exist all at the same time.
Right.
And, you know, you need somebody who's going to be able to be connected to community in a certain regard, but also understand the ins and outs of policing and how to change certain things. So I'm looking forward to Chief Diaz maybe stepping in and bringing some of his lived experience to that role.
I am too. And I think he has the background that a lot of people are looking for. Did a lot of his early policing work down in South Park, down in that precinct down there. So knows the turf here and has made a lot of these different community connections, which is super important. He's also put into place, not that he's a perfect person for the job, but I will say that there was a national search for this. 15 candidates came in, and he was the person that came out of the whole process. So it's somebody who knows the area here, knows all the different issues that go on with the Seattle Police Officers Guild. He's got to deal with those folks and that contract that is still not signed after more than 2 years now. So they're still working on that piece, but also these different issues of police accountability. And I think really importantly this year, Trae, I'm going to keep a very close eye on this idea that the city of Seattle has come up with in its past budget back in November, this idea to try to introduce some 911 alternatives onto the scene, such that when there are low acuity calls, as they're sometimes called, people dealing with drug issues or mental health crises that might be a little bit more of a minor nature, they can actually bring out some different social workers, mental health workers who can deal with those people rather than having officers right there too. So the fact that Chief Diaz is going to be stewarding a big part of that and trying to make sure the Seattle Police Department stays in its lane and these other agencies are doing their thing too, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch that play out. I know also that the chief is very interested in bringing in some more officers. There's been a little glimmer when it comes to more officers coming on the force over the past year and the past couple of months here. So that is something. And I will say just another state issue on that too, to make a connection here. The state is actually working on setting up a system such that there are more police academies actually set up around the state. Right now, there's just one. It's down there in Normandy Park, right? So every officer in the state, no matter what agency they're going through, police department, sheriff, state patrol, they have to go through that setup at Normandy Park, the Criminal Justice Training Center down there. What the state's saying is like, hold up. We've got a big time issue here in terms of the pipeline. We got to get more people through. So this is something that the mayor talked to me about this. He's really lobbying hard at the state level for this. I know Chief Diaz is thinking about this too, but they're really trying to get more people, a more diverse group of people that are from their communities actually doing the training work in their communities too. So they're building out this system, or working on building out this system. They still haven't put it in place yet, building out this system of police academies that would actually happen around the state, such that we can have a bigger and more diverse police force. And I know I covered a lot of different bases there, but it's all connected, I think, to what Chief Diaz is going through right now. He's in a new year. He got through the confirmation process with the city council there with an 8-1 vote. Councilmember Sawant voted against. She often does that. She has a lot of concerns about the police department. Tammy Morales definitely voted yes, but she has some concerns. She definitely wants some more public safety results from the chief. So don't expect this 8-1 vote to be, okay, you're good to go. This is definitely kind of a feet to the fire. I think there's a big test with this 911 alternative that's coming up here real soon. It should be launched in the first few months of this year. So keep a close eye on Chief Diaz, because now that I think he has the permanent role, I think we might see some more of these larger initiatives to try to really improve public safety start to take off. At least I hope so.
Wow, Brian. I just am so in awe of how you keep track of all of
I'm
it,
trying.
brother.
I'm trying.
Thank you so much for joining me on the first episode of the season. It's always great to just do a deeper dive with you.
Yeah.
Make sure folks know how they can find you, Brian.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Trae. All right. Well, you can catch the back issues or the back episodes of Seattle News, Views, and Brews on the Converge YouTube channel. Normally, we're on at Wednesday nights at 7. We'll make sure we have a new episode coming up next week, so check that out. Hit me up at Callanan Seattle. That's where you can get me on Twitter or Facebook or any of the other platforms out there. So check me out there, and happy birthday to Reverend Walden. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's been a joy, a real pleasure.
Back at you.
Always.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness, you guys. All right. I'll be wrapping all this up right after this short break. Stay tuned. You're watching The Day with Trae.
COVID-19 hurt my income, my health, and my family. We were about to lose our home when we heard we might be eligible for homeowner assistance funds from the government. We called 1-877-894-HOME, and a housing counselor stepped in, talked to our lender, and saved our home. Federal funding details at washingtonhalf.org. That's washingtonhaf.org.
Will you marry me, babe?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me put this on you.
What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Trae Holiday. We're bringing back Black Love When We Met. That's right. We need something to warm all of our hearts and to elevate love once again in our communities. We want y'all to go to whereweconverge.com/Black Love so y'all can nominate your favorite couple for the next rendition of this show with me as the host. Let me sit down and have them on my couch and share how their love can inspire us all. Make sure y'all go and get your nominations in today, and be on the lookout for Black Love When We Met coming at you on Converge Media very soon.
Prosperity in Black America. What will this require? Is Black business prospering? Are we reaching women and minority-owned businesses? How do we achieve earning parity for wealth for our families? Do our children really have access to education? Will our families have choices for our children? Prison pipelines, mass incarceration, tearing our families apart. A healthcare system not accessible to the masses. The disproportionate termination of Black women from corporate America. When will we actually begin to address what's really at play? How do Black people gain more power to help make these changes? This requires a lot of political will and courage. I'm that provocateur of change. I am Cindy Bright. Welcome to Heartbeat.
Welcome back, everybody, to The Day with Trae. Oh, Cuddy got me there. I was stretching my neck, y'all. Well, I'm so glad that I was able to sit down with Brian today and really do a deeper dive. I mean, we get really deep on the issue of housing, but it is a major issue that so many of us are dealing with, even for those of us who are secure in our houses, we're homeowners or, renters, and we're all right. This is a situation that really impacts us all, as he was sharing. And it's very true that we do need to take it on and learn more about this this issue. I mean, when you're thinking about our state government, ready to invest $4 billion into something, you can understand that the impact is wide ranging. So we need to do our part, y'all, to be educated on this. Make sure you guys are following up with Brian at Callanan Seattle on all of the platforms. Check him out on Seattle Channel. And of course, next week on Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Well, it's always a blast for me because I get inspired when I'm talking to Brian. Of course, I want y'all to too be inspired to see yourself as a part of the solution, not just informing and educating yourself, but sharing the information and the education you learn with others. That is a way that you can be a part of the solution. Just by sharing information is so critical in today's time. So be a part of the solution, y'all. We definitely need you out there. And thank you again for tuning in for the first episode of season 2 of The Day with Trae. Of course, for me, until tomorrow, y'all, at 11 a.m. Peace.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.